Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Sarah, myself, and our technician with us again, which is very handy, James. Welcome to this little lecture. It's a continuation, really. We've done a series of lectures based on genealogy and the sort of the abstract view of genealogy as well. So you'll pick up. It's all right. Nice to see you. Yep. Okay. So we'll pick up on this particular presentation about the evolution of genealogy, and these are the sort of stories that you need just to know about, even if you choose to do a straight line or a linear sort of your family history. But there are reasons that you might say, oh, well, I didn't know that because I've had a brick wall at that area. Okay. So I'll let you just glance at the screen so you're reading it, because all I'm going to do is just expand on any questions on there. Have any of you thought about writing a timeline of what you find? No? They are invaluable. If you simply make a list of the time, we did have some examples, Sarah. We did bring some examples of timelines. Did you pass them over or not? I don't know. All right, we'll come back to it. Okay. So timelines might be a thing that you think of, just writing little notes or using a laptop, computer, whatever, just writing little things that you find, dating them. I can recommend if you use like a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, you can create a database. That's all. That's the difference, whichever way you want to choose. But they are useful. So in medieval period, roughly 600 AD to 1500 AD, you wouldn't expect much to be written. Not many people could read and write, so you wouldn't expect too much. But when you occasionally go into research, it's very, very useful to bear in mind you're coming across a period in time leading up to a period in about 1507 when things changed. It's something to just be aware of on that. The medieval period for researchers that have got strong ancestral links to the aristocracy tend not to have any problems because they're all many are documented, and you can follow the aristocracy side way back, even going probably as far as Sweden in the 6th century, because so much is documented that you can make educated guesses on that might be the line. And then the demography of people as well, where they moved from to and how they finished up here. Often, I don't know whether you've come across this, when you've done some research, has anybody come across quarter days mentioned? Now, if I may pick you up on the point you made about your work involved probate, and that's where they would be used. You might just find a probate not fully dated, but they use Latin, V1 or 1V or IV, but they'll put the quarter date name. And so that's why I've put that in just as an aid memoir to, if you come across a quarter day, there is a reason. If you bring it up to date, why do we still do recording in quarters? So if you're looking for any certificate or registration, they're in quarters. So it all really stemmed from changing from those quarter days to that which goes on within the year. Again, just something that you can come across. There's not much else to say. I have found many of these. The call today is mentioned on probate. Okay. Yes, they're legal. These are the explanations of them. And actually brought an example of this, which I didn't. I didn't even think of sending an example. But mainly in the 16th century and 17th century, where probate is mentioned, that's when you'll find the call today is further expanded on the record. Okay, right. I said 1507. Sorry, I was 10 years out. 1517. Martin Luther documented a lot of the I think it, did I write it down? Something like 95 letters documenting how we should change, why we should change, etc. So he was the one that really got it recognised that we had to change. This is where it all started to go wrong then, because Henry VIII came to power, or came to being. He dictated a couple of things, as you know. One of them was the dissolution of cathedrals, or Catholicism, I should say, rather than cathedrals. And so we have now an issue of records being kept, records being hidden, records not being maintained at all. Thomas Cromwell, whereas he was the one that ordered all of these changes, what you might be lucky to find is, as now, parish records, parish registers are only passed upwards, or if they're passed over at all, when the register is full. So lots of the registers of that period, those that generally started around the 1538 time, lots of them weren't passed over till they were full, way beyond the life of Thomas Cromwell and Henry VIII. So you wouldn't be, it wouldn't stop you thinking, well, the register was passed over long since their passing, so they could be still could be available. So it's not a brick wall that you would really want to worry about. It may be there. So on one of these, I think on one of these screens, I thought to myself, well, I'll show you the money of the time. I'm not going into detail, but you'll find sometimes you'll find the figure and the letter L. Okay. I'm not going to stand on that one particularly long, but do you know what L means? It's the modern day pound sign. But there is a word for it in Latin. It's Libra. Libra. So you might find that as well. So don't be put off when you see, let's say, just say 4L. It's modern day £4. So you come across these things you can't really identify. And I think I'm going to leave this one out for a moment because I think we're actually showing you an example of the coin. Okay? Right. Queen Elizabeth I, all she did was to continue Henry VIII's philosophy, his policy, etc. But she did pass this law to regularise things. So one thing it did do was start more registers. She said, right, I want registers. Every church will have a register. And these are generally, they're very, very good, except of course you've still got the same problems. Lots of them are in Latin. There's still the same problem of the curate, rector or vicar. He was responsible for purchasing them. So he wrote on every available space, no matter what sort of standard of writing. When you get a register, you look at the register number and you think that's marriages, that's burials, that's births. It's all the same register. And of course, what I often did was turn them upside down to do one of the other. So you do marriages or births one way, turn the register up and do burials the other way up. It's really a pain when you're using a computer to do your research. A real pain. Not come across that yet? You will. You will. This is the funny, and I haven't put too much about it, but every parish, and some are still in existence, had to purchase a parish chest to keep all of the records in. And there were 3 key holders. There had to be 3 key holders for it. Well, of course, it doesn't exist now, but some of the chests do. Some of the chests do. And so on visitation from any touring academic of the time, he could demand the chest is open, and you need 3 key holders to come and open it. Of the time. What was interesting was this. Separate poor law records were kept. Now, we were talking earlier, before we started, about a future idea of zoos to do workhouses. Well, in effect, these were the workhouses of 300 years earlier. So, you question again, if I can't find it one way, I wonder if there was a poor law record. It's amazing what might be there. Amazing. So that's for the future. Okay. Yeah.
Poor law. In the 1700s, I found records that have got 200 to 300 people in the workhouse. That's some building, but it's not, because it's spread over communities.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And they were sort of taken under one wing as a port or a...
Well, before we started, Sue and Sarah and myself were talking about poor laws as is, workhouses as is. And the list is on my computer. But what I've got is, I've got a list of this one word that's used all of the time: union workhouse. Yeah, union meaning it's a conglomerate of all the parishes that have signed up to use that workhouse. Okay, so I nearly timed that with the song out there. Yeah, so workhouses or poor laws, or poor houses, different to almshouses, of course. We've got them down. The union meant that parish had signed up for that workhouse, and we have that will be up to Sue if she wants a presentation on workhouses. But that's where it's all. We've got it all. But you're dead right. It's in effect one and the same. A different way of describing it. So, okay. Oh, sorry, James. Okay. Yeah. I like this. I like this one. I was lucky to find a Boer War parchment of a gentleman released from service, and it was on parchment, and so that's 1901. And I thought, it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So when you take it back, the cathedral, Canterbury being the head of our churches at the time, canon law said we'll write everything on parchment. Well, that helped a lot of people, because whichever animal provided the parchment, there was more of them used. So another story. Have you come across this on any research you've done? BT, Bishop's transcripts? No? Well, when you go into something like any records office, whether it be Essex or any of the other counties, the registers are kept fine. They're either microfiche, they're either original or not digitalised. And all of the others are Bishop's transcript records, where they were passed upwards as they had to do. They had to do a sort of tripartite presentation. One keeps a record, one copy goes to the county, one goes to the bishop. And that's how it was sort of done. What the bishops did was only send them back to the starting point, the records office of the time, generally speaking, because they didn't want to keep them either. But occasionally, if you were in a records office, they are useful to fill in a gap, because when you start to look at them, they might be, and we've come across, we've said this in one of the last lectures, not all the registers are there, so they're not all sequential for whatever reason. Either none kept, none passed over, some destroyed, and they're not going to be allowed to be passed over, so they were destroyed. And so the bishop's transcripts can actually help, by physical research, you filling in a gap. Okay? We've covered that. This was the demand. This is why it didn't happen, because the bishops demanded that they be on, or sorry, the law of the land demanded they be on parchment. So somebody had to transcribe them. Well, they weren't going to do that. So that's another problem. Okay. We've mentioned about the parish chess. Have you, in your area, James, seen any?
Parish chest.
Yeah.
I believe Cheshire Great Burston's got one.
Yeah. Yeah, you could be right. Hello. Good afternoon. Yeah. So they do exist. Now we've got to another peculiarity. Did any of your ancestors pay for a private baptism?
It shows up on some of the 1700s as a private baptism.
Correct.
But it also shows up on the conventional one, so you get it twice.
Yeah, correct. So again, this is for help you're thinking why it might not be in the register, or why it might not be fully explained, because the family have paid privately for that baptism, shall we say, and so it's not necessarily fully recorded, or recorded in the way that the others would be. So, and you'll find that a lot. You'll find that a lot. And when when you're looking at baptism records, you're going to find some peculiar words as well. So you all know what baseborn means. You know what illegitimate means. And there are a few other nice choice words as well that are often described by the vicar or the rector as well. If you like them, it might be baseborn, which is the nicest way of saying they're illegitimate, but there are other more derogatory words that they would write as well, and I've seen some this week. So they're not very nice, but I thought, right, the vicar didn't like that family. Simple as that. This still goes on now, problem now. If you get a marriage certificate, or at least up to the recent changes in 1970 or thereabouts, who filled in the certificate? Say that again. Would you say that again? The vicar. Do you believe that? I would be very skeptical of that. Probably not. And you find so many mistakes, and you'll find them. I think we've mentioned this last time, where one marriage, two certificates, 6 months apart. The reason? The parish clerk, church warden, was the one that filled in the certificate. All that the vicar did was sign it off without looking. 6 months later, they found their mistake. That happens a lot. That happens a lot. So never believe what you see until you can sort of cross-pollinate with other facts that you've got. That happens quite a bit. Okay. I know we've covered this in different ways, and this came up, as I say, this week when I had some Californians over. Everybody refers to the Mayflower, and I said, but it was one sailing. What about the other 319 ships? And the reason they ask is, well, I've got quite a number of the passenger manifests of them, and so you can help the Americans, which I do. But why it's important to us is the centre of organisation seemed to be Billericay, right? Christopher Martin in Billericay. That's why it's important to us. Where did the Mayflower sail from? And again, another links to the area, sailed from Rotherhithe. Okay, yes, it went round Harwich, then it went round to Plymouth or Southampton, Plymouth, but you plot where things move and who might have gone on board. And of course, there's a lot said about Leon Sea. That's where it stopped and picked up passengers from Leon Sea. So again, in your thought process, you might go and say, I wonder if there's a passenger manifest, let's say for the Mayflower, and not find anybody. But that was a passenger manifest from Rotherhithe. So it might have moved to Leon Sea, might have moved to Harwich and picked up other passengers. So you've got to do a little bit more work all of the time, or a little bit more thinking about it. We always say the first written national census of 1841. There was a census in Sheffield in 1831. But how many of you heard of this census? A census in the National Archives from 1642, where it's the culmination of this Catholicism problem, shall we say, where Protestant men had to swear an oath on the letter form, had forms in those days, back in 1642. And they're available as well, should you need some form of specific research. So that may be a little bit of a surprise. But they were getting us then, just as they are now. But this part here may be the important bit for you. If you knew that your family was centred in one particular parish, suddenly you might have broken the brick wall that gets you further back in that particular research by the National Archives holding the parish record of this, where the name might appear that you're looking for. Have you ever found that as a necessity? No? It might be something new anyway. I love this because Cornwall was a form of Celtic language. So not only have you got Latin to deal with, you've now got other possible language problems to deal with, or language issues to deal with. So Cornwall might be Celtic. And it's not dissimilar from the Northern French, the Southern French language, because that's where they sort of moved to. So little things that may just stick with you as well. I can't find it. Turn it on its head. Could anybody transcribe it? That's the point. You've got a language that not Latin, not English, a Celtic language that probably nobody's ever transcribed. I'm presenting a lecture on Wednesday night to California on Zoom about a Mohawk Indian chief. Okay, nothing in our history, a lot in their history. And one of the things there was the Mohawk language used English letters as we know, but only 16 of them. And so that's been a challenge, sorting what you might think you think you might be saying. So it's not dissimilar from the problems that you'll find if you find no transcription of a Celtic language. Okay. All right, then we have our dear friend Oliver Cromwell. One of his edicts was the fact that he thought the parish churches were disorganised, and this here was his edict, but he banned registers. So roughly for 11 years, Oliver Cromwell banned registers being maintained. However, as we've said earlier, the registers weren't passed upwards or over or upwards until they were complete. So a lot of the parish vicars, rectors, or whomever carried on. They might have carried on, privately, but when it was time for Cromwell to go and the registers then started to come back into the registry offices, they were just on paper, generally on paper. And somebody else was tasked with possibly putting them into a register. But so that was the problem that he's left you if you're doing research. That if you can get back to the Cromwellian times, you've got to remember that there may not be registers, but later there might be papers in the registers. There might be, when you look at a list, you think, but that register's there with those dates. That register's got the same, got a date with it that falls within that first one, but they might be registers that have been rewritten for these reasons. Okay. I like this because you had to pay for marriages then as well. So you didn't want too many of them. They changed the parish clerk to be a formal function. And I think I didn't put under threat of death, but there were legal threats against not maintaining proper records. We've got about feast days here, and it was a little bit of a problem because one of the effects was people abstained from food, but people also died from that as well. And so you just might find some very, very strange comments made on burial records. In addition to the time coming up about the shroud, woolen or silk, whether they were buried in woolen or silk, you might just find other little snippets from the parish priest saying might be cause of death even. Okay. Now, Charles II, he started to bring everything back, but unfortunately he ran into a few problems. One was the plague, and one was what we call the Great Fire of London. Taking the plague first, we had, as did most cities, we had things like city walls. So London had a city wall, and I was part of some work that was being done on Broad Street when that was removed as a station, but it was on the site of a city wall. And of course, what you're going to find on the far side of a city wall, you're going to find skeletons until your heart's content, because they were just thrown over the wall outside the city. One that we're more interested in our area, we've got a place called Langthorne Abbey. Have you heard of that? Right. But it's the same sort of problem at Langthorne Abbey. That line, sorry, the metaphoric line, goes from West Ham to North Woolwich in that area. And of course there, some railway people, and I was one of them, decided we'd electrify the route to North Woolwich. What do we go through? The burial ground of Langthorne Abbey. Only 800 and something graves. Of course, the first thing that happened, any research these days, the first people you call in are the archaeologists, in case they find anything. And that was the classic one there. Why I said it's linked to what we do is Billericay exists through the auspices of Langthorne Abbey. They paid for a lot of churches in Billericay. The priests and that were part of the function from Langthorne Abbey in West Ham. In West Ham, yeah. So there are links all of the way around. I went up to Oxford metaphorically a couple of years ago. Just drove up to have a look around, and of course they've got one wonderful place there called the Bodleian Museum, and that's got so much in it to be untrue. Well, you would imagine it had, but that's worth it, because again you can find all the links mentioning our area, mentioning this area in the Bodleian. Quite interesting. And then in the Great Fire of London, as we call it, yeah, records. Really, that's the only thing these days that we're missing, isn't it? The records that were not completed. Yeah. Okay. The argument was we were bringing into this country silk at the expense of our own trades. Okay. So the diktat was, we won't in future bury people in silk. We will bury them in wool. And to do so, I think the fine, Sarah, was 5 shillings or £5. I can't remember. Now, bearing in mind that, oh, sorry. Right, sorry. So I apologise. You can read better than me. I only wrote it. But what the vicar had to do was had to sign the burial record, buried in wool. Now, if I can just digress slightly, if you don't mind. You've got a place near you called Bread and Cheese Hill.
Yes.
With a pub. That's on the former coaching in route. Okay. We have got a lecture on coaching inns. What they used to do there was linked to what we're talking about. They would question the Flemish traders, and if they couldn't pronounce the anglicised words, they'd murder them. It's the best way of saying it, because that was not the spin-offs, but that was the precursor.
Yes.
To the formalities of silk bearing, silk or wool. And I've been into, again, I'm digressing slightly. I've been into a restaurant in the harbour of Scheveningen in Holland, and I say it very slowly because I think I got it right. the Dutch would murder the Germans in World War II because they could not pronounce it correctly, or couldn't pronounce it in Dutch. So they took their vengeance out on the German soldiers because they could not pronounce the harbour. And I say it very slowly because I know I've been there and I can't with Dutch people, and they just shake their head, you know. So, but that's bread and cheese. They couldn't. I think the term was bread and cheese, and they couldn't pronounce it, or couldn't pronounce it in the anglicised format, you know. So anyway, by the by. So anyway, okay, right. I did mention the costs, etc., and I'll leave that. But I'll just ask the question: do you know the law about registration? Modern day registration law? Huh? How long do you think you've got to formally register any birth, death? Roughly, not roughly, 42 days. Yeah, great, good. So that's the legal term. What happens after, I don't know, but in theory, you have 42 days to register. I presume there'd be a fine, but that's about all. There's many little nuances about it. Tax collectors used to go around, but of course tax collectors were robbed themselves, you know. So it wasn't a good profession to go around to parishes as a tax collector. Yeah, lots of reasons, but people wouldn't pay, or they'd murder a tax collector and take the money and spread the money back out. It's real Robin Hood stuff that it did exist. But anyway, that you've grasped there that we're back to that word denier. If we haven't got a picture of it on this presentation, it's like a gold coin, our former legal money. So you know, it's of interest to know these things when the words are used and you might not know what the word means. So anyway, okay.
Lots of the births weren't registered really.
Well, you didn't.
People didn't.
Right. Ask the question the other way round. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I'm responding. I mean, in answering the question the other way round, when you look up a birth, you're not going to find it of yesteryear. You'll only find a baptism. Then in the late 19th century, rectors and vicars started to put baptism date born on, which was very useful. But they didn't have to record that. So if you didn't take a child in for a baptism, they didn't have to go in for a birth registration. Again, precisely. So it's a little bit more you've got to think about. And it comes back to that one little thing. The most important thing is finding the parish church. Find the parish church, and then it opens up these sort of questions. Yeah, okay.
You failed to register a birth within a year, it's a £200 fine.
Is it?
Yeah.
So I know it wasn't a great deal of money. Yeah, I didn't know that though.
How can they check?
Sorry?
How can they check? You know, if you've not.
Well, it's sort of a tripartite type of issue now. So a doctor, if he was a home birth, is required to document it. He's required to pass it on to a registration office, and you are the third party.
Yes.
You then link the tripartite together.
Years ago, that didn't happen.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It just did not happen that way. So much of the onus was put on the parish priest, yes, parish rector, parish vicar to do that. Okay, you'll love this. I like to sit down here and say, could somebody explain this to me? You better read it and then probably have another read as well. It's when we change calendars. It's when we it's when we change calendars. So you have a period of time where you're not sure which year the person could either been born, died, or married in. The easier one to handle is births, because you can speculate that a January marriage might have resulted in a March birth, you know, because that's what used to happen. And you could speculate it is the same year. It's just a change of calendar.
You get so confused with it.
Well, yeah, there's another, if I can digress slightly again, there's another little more modern change. I don't know if you've heard it quoted, Bristol time. Bristol time was 11 minutes ahead of London time. And so when the railways were doing timetables, you had to allow an 11-minute tolerance on the times, because Bristol held a different time frame. But we eventually got round to sort of doing everything on one longitude. Sorry, are you okay with that?
Still a clock in Bristol that shows both times.
Sorry, James?
There's still a clock in Bristol that shows both times.
Is there really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I can only vouch to one clock that I've stood under, and that's in Berlin, where I've stood under the world clock there, and you look at it, it's every time of every major capital in the world. Yeah, got a picture of me under that. So there are things that you do when you go to tourists, and I'm enjoying just digressing slightly to say you never. Lots of the people I'm dealing with in California are German extraction, and again, if anybody had German extraction here, little nuances. Ladies, you've heard of eau de cologne. Where does cologne come from? Right? Comes from Cologne. It comes from a street called Glockenstrasse. Okay? Nothing, I've been there, nothing like. The shops, and I say shops because it's more than one in this block, above it got the most beautiful clock, and around the clock is a circular army of Napoleon. Okay? Of Napoleon's men. And you think, well, that's really lovely to see. So now eau de cologne comes from here. Have you heard of the number 4711?
Yes.
Yeah? Sorry, it's for the ladies.
You're not old enough.
Yeah?
So then they're perfume.
How did it get that number? Napoleon reorganised all the street numbers. So they've maintained Glockenstrasse 4711 from Napoleon. So that's in Germany. Hey, look, throwaways. Sorry, I'm boring you. Right. So the calendar is a difficult one. You've got to sit and think about the calendar when it says dual dates, Gregorian or Georgian or Gregorian calendars. Not an easy one. It can confuse you because you're speculating, was he born 15 months after or 2 months after a marriage, for example. I use tight timescales. Okay, we still keep Vange books even now, but we remove the need for Quakers and Jews to be maintained in our record system. So if anybody's got Jewish links, that can be a problem. What we did encompass in latter times was the Catholic, but we never really got to grips with the Quakers and the Jewish side of things. You have to rely on their records. That's a problem when you find them, because so many people in those from 1640 onwards were the Puritan or Quaker people. And of course, how many Quaker cemeteries are there? Couple to London. So where are they buried? They're buried in our cemeteries. So you have to, again, it's thinking. It's thinking. If you've got somebody that might have been a Quaker or associated, and there were lots in Wickford, in this area, yeah, lots. So you might find that you have to think about looking at a local church record to see if there is any indication that they were Quakers. They would generally be buried with a headstone or not, but against a wall in a little plot somewhere in a burial ground, church burial ground. So again, just helping you think on how you might find the evidence that you might be looking for. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Secret marriages, no records kept on that. And so that a law had to be passed to make it illegal. Two books on vellum. A band's register is still kept, but when you're looking for a marriage, it's not always mentioned that the 3 weeks they read the banns led to a marriage. They walked away from the marriage. Something to think about. Okay, Sarah. How many of you had how many people here have had found transportation within their family? Sarah, where were yours transported to?
I didn't have world access at the time. I think it was I don't know if they were transported there, but I know that one of them died in Adelaide.
Adelaide, yeah.
So
yeah.
whether that's where they went.
That would be possibly a second stop. They're probably going to Fremantle or something like that, and possibly go around in the bay. Yeah, and then either go legal transportations. In other words, people that have been criminally found wanting. They would probably go. Firstly, they went to Van Diemen's Land, which is Tasmania, but then they went upwards, Sydney and upwards. So you've got taken names with them as well. So you've got go about 100 miles upwards. You've got Newcastle. You know, so some of the things that went with the people that were transported. You think this is one way of spreading an English way of life, almost a British way. They took in the early 1770s, they took cricket to America. We took a touring team to play what was then classed as Americans at cricket and lost. But they were English people playing cricket. So, you know, you get these little nuances relating in transportation. And I must say that if you're looking doing any newspaper research, the Americans' newspapers are so much better than ours, because they use them all as a diary all of the time, and they're so used to trying, if you can, go into an American newspaper. All of the universities, or even the National Archives in America, you can often go in free on newspapers. Well worth it. Okay. Not many people came home. We had some visitors a couple of years ago in our office at Tyler Park from Australia, and the people came from Wickford, Shopgate, Downton, that area. They asked us, I did some work for them, and I found a very interesting one. And I wrote back to the lady when she went back and said, you might write to Maersk shipping line in Perth, because I think that you could put all of your family tree together and find that you're related to the Maersk shipping from Sweden. And who knows, you know, how that may manifest itself, but it was a probability, you know, that was the case. Okay, this is our problem now, isn't it? Marriage is in register offices because there's no, apart from the register office itself, there's no Essex Register Office records. So you've only got Essex registered church records. So it's a problem that we're facing more and more now, because when you start to think about it, all of the private licensed premises can now formally do these ceremonies, but there's no formal record other than one central point, which it may not be the Essex Records Office. It may be a government records office.
I think girls been allowed to marry at 12.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that comes up, I'll tell you where that comes up, when you've got, in the 15th century, 16th century, early 1500s, you've got marriages and you think that can't be right. That person's only 3. That can't be right. You know, ridiculous ages.
Yeah.
But they used to betroth the people. They're betrothed to marry at 12. And you have to work that out and say, you know, the age was right. The age was correct. It's a betrothal, not a marriage. Okay, Sarah? So now in the mid-19th century, we've got municipal cemeteries now appearing. You're doing research, you've got to just get to the back of your mind to say, I take West Ham area as a generalisation. You've got the cemetery in East Ham, communal cemeteries in East Ham, which covers Beckton, Canning Town, the east side of the West Ham borough. You know, so you've just got to visualise where you might look for a grave or a burial. And the City of London Cemetery now encompasses so much. They've got good records though. City of London at Manor Park have got really good records. And you'll find that's useful because they've got cremation records as well there. Yeah, so that's a useful one. You just got to know how to.
Yeah, it's awkward to find somewhere when you get there, it's gone. You know?
Absolutely, and these days, very, very few churches do burials. They'll only do family grave burials. So, you know, if supposedly, right, and I don't say that lightly, but I think, again, I'm going to stand to be corrected on it if anybody knows better. How many coffins, how many burials were allowed on one grave, in one grave?
It's 3 or 6?
3. How many now?
I don't know.
Why?
Oh, rules, what?
Health and safety.
Health and safety. A bit late when you're dead, isn't it? So is it just one now? In each block?
No, I'm not sure. I stand to be corrected. I think it's 2, and the reason I say that is it could be 1. But health and safety came in and said, well, you can't have grave diggers digging 6 foot down without completely enclosing.
Right, yeah.
I thought 4 o'clock for 3.
Right.
So I'm assuming that the first one goes down to a certain depth and then
Yes.
after that.
Yeah. So if it's a private purchase of shall we say a family purchase, I think you still can. But health and safety came along and said, no, you can't do that anymore. So it's got to come up. You know. So you can.
Makes no sense.
Of course it doesn't. But what it means is, would people as a family pay now for a digger? Would you pay for scaffolding to go into a burial? No, say cremate. You know. See, I'll throw the pot in. No, I'm being flippant. Well, you know, I'll throw the pot in a hole, but I'm not going to pay £1,000 or £2,000 to have a digger come in, a back actor come in and dig a hole. Right, sorry about that, Sarah. Right, we have talked about the changes to certificates, and these are generally the reasons. And most of it we have mentioned before. Even that still doesn't work now. This doesn't work properly now, because you could have sisters marrying brothers, and it's only the surnames that are recorded. And when somebody gets it, you just see, oh my God, who married who? That's still one of the issues now. If you don't put four names on. So, okay,